Hello everyone, welcome to today's Natural Medicine Week webinar. I'm Steph from ATMS, and today we have the wonderful AMG presenting on managing your PCOS and endometriosis symptoms naturally. AMG is the founder of the Endometriosis Nutritionist, an online clinic dedicated to helping people take control of their symptoms through food. She is also a behavioural psychologist, ensuring that her advice is practical and sustainable. She is the author of Eat Your Way to Less Pain, Reduce Endometriosis Symptoms One Meal at a Time, which is available on Amazon. And she is the host of the Endometriosis Nutritionist podcast. So thank you so much, AMG, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Steph. Great to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about PCOS and endometriosis. Let me start by sharing my screen. There we go. Yep. Am I sharing?
Not yet.
Here we go. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's better. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I haven't always been a nutritionist. I started out my work life in learning and development and in corporate. And when I hit my 40s, I was kind of over that world a little bit, and I had a chance to do a nutrition program a few years earlier. Had learned so much about food and our relationship with food, and I thought it would be a good idea to retrain and become a nutritionist. Now, I was a single mom at the time, working full time, so it took me a while to get there, but I graduated with a qualification in nutritional medicine and started an online nutrition clinic focusing on women's health and children's health. And my very, very first client had polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS. So that was my first sort of real life experience of helping someone deal with a disease through food. And then I did more work around women's health and started to notice that more and more clients signed up who also had endometriosis. And that became such a big part of it that I kind of rebranded the clinic to be the Endometriosis Nutritionist podcast. Not a podcast, clinic. I have a podcast as well, but that came later. And today I'm talking about PCOS and endometriosis because often there is an assumption that they are similar, or that there's overlap, or there's other assumptions that you have either PCOS or endometriosis, and there's not a lot of clarity often about how nutrition can help manage the symptoms. So that's what I want to talk about today. But let's first have a look at why you're here. And it could be that you are here because you have endometriosis, or you think you have endometriosis. Maybe you're here because you have PCOS, or you think you have PCOS. Maybe you're here because you have both. So let me know what your situation is. Excellent. Okay, let's look at the results. So the endometriosis wins out. The majority of you here have endometriosis. Some of you have PCOS, and some have both. And that is really possible. Unfortunately, with both these diseases, it's very common to have something else as well. And I see quite a few clients who have both endometriosis and PCOS. So here's what we're going to look at today. First, I want to dive a little bit deeper into endometriosis and into polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, just to make sure that you understand both those diseases. We'll look at how they differ and also where the overlap might be. And then we're going to look at each separately and how food can help you reduce the severity of your symptoms. And then I'll give you some practical first steps to start doing right now when it comes to your diet and managing your symptoms. I want to start with some common myths. There's a lot of misconceptions out there around PCOS and about endometriosis, and not just the people in the world, so to speak, but even with specialists and even with gynecologists, there's often a misunderstanding on each of these diseases. So let's start with PCOS. Now, it's called polycystic ovary syndrome. So you might assume that one of the key elements of that is that you have cysts on your ovaries. That's not the case. You can have cysts on your ovaries, but you don't necessarily have to. It's often a combination of symptoms, and cysts can be one of those symptoms, but not everybody has them. Some of the symptoms that we usually use to identify whether you have PCOS or not is irregular periods, or irregular in the sense of some months you do and some months you don't have a period. High levels of male hormones, in particular testosterone, and if you can see polycystic ovaries on an ultrasound, that definitely indicates PCOS. But you don't have to have all three to be diagnosed with it. And PCOS is not classified as a disease, it's classified as a syndrome, which means that we don't have a proper diagnostic tool. We need a combination of symptoms to say you have PCOS. And the kind of analogy I use is, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, we're going to assume that it is a duck, if you understand what I'm saying there. The other next myth is that only people who are overweight get PCOS. We will look into what the connection is between PCOS and being overweight. But there's a lot of people that are lean and they have PCOS, cannot have PCOS as well. It's actually called lean PCOS. The problem with this myth is that if that is something that a specialist believes is true, or just your doctor, then you're not likely to get the diagnosis. And with both PCOS and endometriosis, you can often struggle for a long time with weird symptoms, and it can help to get a diagnosis, because then it's like, okay, I'm not making it up, I'm not crazy, I actually have something wrong with me. Another myth is that PCOS means that you're infertile, that you can't get pregnant, which is not true at all. Yes, it affects your fertility, so it will be more difficult to conceive, but it doesn't mean that you cannot fall pregnant. And there are many women with PCOS who've had very healthy pregnancies. And the final myth that I wanted to share with you is that natural treatments don't work for PCOS. Well, there's more and more research that says that things like diet and lifestyle, supplements, and even managing stress have the same, if not better, results than medication alone. So now let's have a chat about endometriosis. Again, a few myths around it. And the first one is that period pain is normal, just tough it out. The amount of women that have been told when they complain about period pain to specialists, to doctors, but even to friends and family, you say, oh, I've got such bad period pain. Well, everybody goes, well, that's part and parcel of being a woman. It is not. A little bit of a cramp when you have your period, that cramping sensation, that is manageable and goes away with some over-the-counter pain medication or a hot water bottle or some movement, that is normal. But pain that stops you from doing normal things, that means you have to call in sick, that makes you feel so nauseous that you're just sitting over the toilet bowl in case you have to throw up, that force you to lie in bed in the fetal position and not able to do anything, that is never normal. So you should not tough it out. Another myth is that pregnancy cures endometriosis. I had a client, she was about 19 when she came to me, and she had had her first period when she was about 14 with terrible pains and terrible symptoms almost from the beginning, which is quite normal with endometriosis. And she had a doctor who knew about endometriosis. And so he said, I think that's what you've got. So I recommend that you try and get pregnant as early as possible, because then it's gone. Which is not true. And pregnancy gives you a break from endometriosis, but as soon as you've given birth and your period returns, so do the symptoms. And often the gut symptoms related to endometriosis don't go away at all. Another myth: hysterectomy will cure endometriosis. Absolutely not, because endometriosis is not limited to your uterus. You can have endometriosis on your uterus, but it can also be on your bladder, on your bowel, it can be on your spine, it can be on your muscles, it can be on your diaphragm, it's found in the lungs, it's found in the brain. Endometriosis tissue can be anywhere. Removing the uterus may take some out, but if it's still elsewhere, it can still grow. And in particular, if you have a hysterectomy where your ovaries stay in place to help you not go into early menopause, then you will still have the same symptoms. And as I said about pregnancy, you still will have gut symptoms, and we'll talk about that later. The final myth is that endometriosis always causes infertility. As with PCOS, it affects your fertility. Absolutely. It makes it more difficult to fall pregnant, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. So by managing your symptoms, by reducing some of the elements that we'll talk about later, you can increase your chances of falling pregnant. And I work with a lot of women who have endometriosis or have PCOS, and we're able to get them to where they fall pregnant, whether naturally or through assisted reproductive services. Okay, let's look at how PCOS and endometriosis differ and what they have in common, which is an interesting thing to look at because I so often see women who have both. So first, let's look at PCOS. Now, PCOS, the definition of it is that ovaries produce unusually high levels of androgens or male hormone, in particular testosterone. And that leads to imbalances in the reproductive hormones, so estrogen and progesterone. There is an element to it that is really key, and that is insulin resistance, where the body blocks glucose from going into cells. About 6 to 13% of women and those born female have been diagnosed with PCOS, but there could well be more out there. They just never get the diagnosis. So insulin resistance is a big issue, and it means that insulin is needed to help your blood get rid of excess sugars. So it normally, if you have something that it gets broken down into glucose molecules, they get into your bloodstream, and then your pancreas creates insulin to remove that glucose from your blood into other cells. What the problem with PCOS is that you are resistant to insulin. That means that the normal production, the normal amount of insulin produced, is not enough to do the work. So your pancreas, which produces the insulin, needs to produce more. So you end up with excess insulin in your body, which is highly inflammatory and can cause all sorts of can disrupt your hormonal cycle. It can prevent the ovaries from releasing an egg, so then you don't even ovulate. And insulin can also stimulate your hormones, your ovaries, to produce more male hormones. And that can lead to facial hair. So you grow a beard, to severe acne, and definitely to menstrual irregularities. The other thing, which is why lean women sometimes don't get diagnosed, is that insulin resistance is connected to weight gain. And being overweight then worsens your insulin resistance. So you get into a vicious cycle of insulin resistance and weight gain. So androgen or male hormones are the key hormone that plays havoc with your reproductive system. And some of the symptoms are irregular periods, acne, and excess facial hair. And when we look at managing your symptoms, what we are looking for is to improve your body's ability to react properly to insulin so that you don't get that excess of insulin. All right, that's PCOS. Let's look at endometriosis. So endometriosis is a disease where the cells and tissues similar to the lining of your uterus end up outside your uterus. We don't know what's causing it. It's the same, by the way, with PCOS. We don't have a clear cause, so there's no cure for now. We don't know what's causing it, but it can end up anywhere. We know that about 14%, so 1 in 9 women worldwide, are diagnosed with endometriosis. It's usually something that most patients experience. Once they get the diagnosis, they go, I've had this from my very first period. And it can take 7 to 10 years to get the diagnosis, because it seems to be a disease that has to do with the reproductive system. But we'll look at that it actually has to do more with other body systems, and therefore some of the symptoms can be very confusing. So although hormones are involved, it is first and foremost an inflammatory disease. When you have endometriosis, you have chronic systemic inflammation, which means that all your organs, all your tissues are in a constant state of inflammation. And inflammation creates an environment that has excess blood flow, that means nutrients, and therefore it is perfect for endometriosis tissue to grow and to flourish. It is dependent on estrogen. So it's not caused by estrogen. There's no estrogen dominance, which is a term you often hear. It means that just the tissue, wherever it is, let's say you have it on your bowel, when estrogen levels rise between your ovulation and your period, the endometriosis on your bowel also starts to grow. That happens to the endometrium inside your uterus because it's getting ready in case you're pregnant. And then when the estrogen level drops, which is the signal for your body to have your period, to shed the tissue, that endometriosis on your bowel also sheds. That comes with torn blood vessels, and that means bleeding. And then you have endometriosis tissue in your pelvic area in this case, and blood, and that touches other organs and tissues, and that further creates inflammation and can create pain. So the pain in endometriosis with periods is often that part. So the most common symptoms are pain. Well, the most known symptoms are pain, fatigue, heavy bleeding, long bleeding, irregular bleeding. But more and more we now accept, and as a nutritionist that makes so much sense to me, but is that there are gut issues and things like bloating. So the endobelly is a well-known symptom for anybody who has endometriosis. So there's constipation, diarrhea, vomiting and nausea, but also intense fatigue that is beyond a bad night's sleep. You can have migraines and headaches. So there's a lot of more going on. And that means that often if your symptoms are not necessarily, you don't really have heavy bleeding, you don't have to have period pain. I have many clients who don't really have pain, they just have lots of other debilitating symptoms. But if you don't have those symptoms that everybody thinks are endometriosis, you can get misdiagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, or I've seen clients put on the weirdest diets to try and fix symptoms that turned out to be connected to that inflammatory component. So when we look at endometriosis, we focus on reducing inflammation. Okay, so let's look at how we can use food to manage your symptoms, to reduce the severity of your symptoms. There's no cure. We're not curing PCOS with nutrition. And anybody who tells you that they can cure your PCOS, really take that with a grain of salt. But we can reduce the severity of your symptoms. So if we're talking about insulin resistance, and that means that we need to, and we want to improve your body's ability to manage insulin or to control insulin, then we need to keep your blood sugar levels as even as possible. That means that your diet needs to be a low glycemic diet. So that means the sort of this, you have sugar, which is crazy glycemic, which you have a little bit of sugar and it immediately increases your blood sugar levels. So we need food, we need a combination of food where your blood sugar levels stay lovely and even. That means not having any sugary stuff. Sorry, the chocolate is out. Not having processed foods because they often have lots and lots of sugar. But even, excuse me, some things like some fruits can really spike your blood sugar levels. So we need to work a way that that doesn't happen. So avoid foods that we know are high glycemic, and that includes simple carbohydrates, so pastas, white rice, white bread, those sorts of foods. The second strategy is to have a form of protein with every meal, and I mean breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. You need to balance whatever you eat with and add a good source of protein, because protein breaks down much slower than carbohydrates, and that means that it slows down the absorption of the glucose into the blood, and that keeps the blood sugar levels lovely and even. Every meal also need some good fat. And often when I say that to clients with PCOS, especially if they're overweight, they get really worried. They go, are you going to make me put on more weight? But we're talking about healthy dietary fat, and that includes fat from dairy. Saturated fat is, in small amounts, a healthy fat, but every meal needs to have that combination of fat and protein together with healthy carbohydrates to ensure that, as I said, your blood sugar levels stay lovely and even. The other thing that it does, it helps you to feel full for longer. You've probably heard that. And that's particularly important when you have insulin resistance, because if you're very likely to be hypoglycemic if you have PCOS, which means that your blood sugar levels also drop really quickly. And then you're going to look for a quick something. If you are hypoglycemic, you'll know what it feels like. You get clammy, you get the shakes, and you need something sweet. You need some sugary stuff. So having protein and fat with every meal helps to avoid that. So you're not going to look for the quick sugary hits to stop the shaking and the clamminess. And then there's some specific nutrients. And although you can get those from your food, when we're talking about nutritional therapy, we really looking at supplements to get them to you in a therapeutic dose. So here are some examples of very powerful nutrients that we may consider for you to take. So inositol is a nutrient that helps you to regulate blood sugar levels, and it can also help you normalize your ovulation. Magnesium is good for just about everything. It's a little magical nutrient. But when it comes to PCOS, it also helps with to reduce your insulin resistance, and it helps lower testosterone levels. Remember, that was one of the key problems with PCOS, that you have abnormally high testosterone levels. And if PMS is part of your symptomology for PCOS, it can also help to reduce PMS. Zinc is an important nutrient to help reduce insulin resistance. And if you have the facial hair, it helps reduce that as well. And it can help reduce menstrual pain. So if you have pain around your period as part of your symptoms, it can help as well. And then omega-3 fatty acids are very helpful to reduce insulin resistance and make your body more sensitive to insulin when it's produced. It improves your lipid profile. When you have excess insulin, it affects the good and the bad fats in your body. And omega-3 fatty acids can really help there. It can help reduce obesity, which people who are overweight often find absolutely baffling that fat can help, but it definitely does. And it helps reduce the inflammation that is a consequence of excess insulin in your body. So that's PCOS. Let's look at how to manage endometriosis symptoms. Now, the focus is different. As you may remember, I said we're looking at reducing inflammation with endometriosis. And there are some differences in the nutritional approach, but there are also some similarities with PCOS when it comes to managing symptoms through diet. So the first strategy, and if you don't do anything else, this is definitely, and you're not doing this if you have endometriosis, this is really where you need to start. And that is to go absolutely gluten-free, and really you should also go dairy-free. And here's why. So gluten are the protein in wheat. So anything that contains flour of some sort, wheat flour, so like breads and biscuits, and it's in a lot of processed foods as well. Gluten has been very well researched when it comes to endometriosis. And there was one study, I think in 2012, where almost 7,000 nurses in the US who had endometriosis were included in the study, and they were told to go gluten-free for a year. And what the researchers were measuring was pain, so their period pain. And after 12 months, 75% of the initial participants were still eating gluten-free. Now, as someone who has been around trying to, the world of getting people to eat differently, that is a staggering number of people who stuck with the diet. Because the majority of people, when they go on a different way of eating, they give up at some point. It gets too hard, or things happen. Now, they did, almost all of them, about 80%, saw an improvement in pain. So the reduction of period pain. Some were completely pain-free after 12 months. And there were quite a few who said that they didn't see any change in their pain, but they were still eating gluten-free. The researchers had no explanation for that. What I think happened is that those who did not see a major improvement in pain would have seen an enormous improvement in other symptoms that weren't included in the study, such as endobelly, so bloating, the brain fog, the fatigue. Part of what we know about endometriosis is that you have a leaky gut. So that means that undigested food particles can get through your gut wall into the bloodstream, which is not where they're supposed to be. But gluten and dairy proteins as well can, when they get into the bloodstream, can get to the brain and cross the blood-brain barrier. And when they get to the brain, they act as opiates. So that explains, if you have it, you'll recognize this. It's that fatigue where it's like you're walking through mud. It's like you're in a big cloud and you just can't seem to focus, and you can't seem to guess anyway. You struggle with your thoughts, and you can't think them through till the end. That kind of experience is what gluten and dairy proteins can do in the brain. So I think these nurses stayed on the gluten-free diet because they saw so many other benefits and so many other improvements that weren't simply studied. The reason I always say also go dairy-free is because those dairy proteins with leaky gut ending up in the brain and still producing that fatigue that you would get. The main focus of the diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, if you Google anti-inflammatory diet, you'll come plenty of different suggestions and ideas for an anti-inflammatory diet. And you pick one and you diligently follow it, you may not get improvement, which is very confusing. And the reason for that is that yes, there are some generic foods that are inflammatory. If you're used to eating red meat and you know those really big steaks and you eat that regularly, then that's very inflammatory. Processed foods are very inflammatory. But what people often don't realize is that we all have a very personal relationship with food and foodstuffs. And most of us, I'm willing to put my reputation on, have intolerances to certain foods. And they are different for you than they are for me. And if you eat a food that you are intolerant to, especially if it's a food that you eat regularly, then your body reacts, and that reaction creates a trigger for the immune system, and that produces inflammation. So I had a client who, and we did a test for her food intolerances, and she found out that amongst a few other foods, but she was intolerant to banana. And when we talked about it, she said, this is weird because, and I don't know how to deal with this because I have banana every day with my breakfast. I have a banana. I thought I had to have a banana a day. That was good for me. And so she stopped eating a banana every day for breakfast, and together with the other foods that she was intolerant to, remove those, she started to feel better very quickly. Now, I'm not intolerant to banana. I'm intolerant to apple and chickpeas. You may be intolerant to other foods. And as long as you still eat those, you irritate your gut, you trigger your immune system to create an inflammatory response. So that's your anti-inflammatory will be uniquely yours. PCOS allows you to basically eat a more generic, low glycemic diet and you'll feel much better. Endometriosis requires you to have a personalized anti-inflammatory diet. There's only one endometriosis diet, and that is your endometriosis diet. And that can be very confusing to work out. We definitely need to do some gut healing. We know that people with endometriosis have leaky gut or gut hyperpermeability. We know that they have gut dysbiosis. So the microbiome is out of whack, and there's too many harmful bacteria and not enough of the beneficial bacteria. And we know that the immune system sits in the gut, right? You hear that more and more often. It's not just for viruses and colds, it's also for everything else related to your immune system. Harmful bacteria in your gut produce endotoxins, and those endotoxins trigger the immune system, and that responds with inflammation. So we need to balance that as well. So that's a big focus with endometriosis, is we don't look at hormones, we look at the gut, which, go figure. All right, some specific nutrients that can help with endometriosis. As with PCOS, the omega-3 fatty acids are very, very valuable because they are anti-inflammatory. And so is magnesium. Magnesium reduces pain, and often my clients with endometriosis have already worked out that if they have period pain, it helps to take a bath with Epsom salts, which means that that's just basically magnesium, but your body absorbs it through the skin. It can help with hormone balance, and it reduces an oxidative stress, which is a key element of inflammation, and it also is involved in energy production. So magnesium can help you have a little bit more energy. Also because it helps to produce better sleep, and that can be helpful with reducing stress. And we know that stress and sleep deprivation increase inflammation. So it's not just about what you eat. And if you have reduced stress, and this is kind of a psychological side to it, it can actually change your pain perception. So you might not even completely reduce your pain, but you start to see it differently when your stress is reduced. Another nutrient that is really valuable is zinc. Zinc is a key nutrient for the immune system, and it modulates the immune response. So here we go. I was going ahead a bit too much. So zinc helps to, it's almost like it talks to the immune system and goes, you've worked hard enough, you can calm down now. And it reduces oxidative stress, which will also reduce inflammation. And then turmeric or curcumin. It's a magical little nutrient. It's nature's anti-inflammatory, and so taking a turmeric supplement can really help not only reduce inflammation slowly over time, but it's also very good at healing the gut. So you're kind of working on two prongs there. So where do you start? There's some simple daily steps you can start taking right now to work towards that will really help you reduce the severity of your PCOS symptoms, your endometriosis symptoms, and if you have both, for both. Number one is to eat a whole food diet and to avoid processed foods. Anything that comes in a jar or in a sachet, or even things like sausages or meatballs that have been pre-seasoned. They are full of flavorings, of additives, of preservatives, and they all are triggering the immune system and increase inflammation. And processed foods are usually extremely high in sugar. Look at the ingredients list. If the ingredients are listed in order of how much of it is in that food, and often sugar is the second ingredient or third ingredient mentioned from before the actual food that you think you're buying is mentioned. So avoid processed foods, fresh fruit and vegetables, good quality, small amounts, good quality meat. If you have PCOS, good quality, high full fat dairy not if you've got endo. Eat protein and fat with every meal. Even if you don't have PCOS, if you have endometriosis, you still want to keep your blood sugar level as even as possible, because sugar for you is also going to increase inflammation. So by having protein and fat with every meal, you allow your blood sugar levels to stay much more even, and that reduces the insulin that is being produced and floating around in your body, causing all kinds of havoc. Add anti-inflammatory ingredients to your food as much as you can. Turmeric, garlic, ginger, onions, and lots of, obviously, lots of different colored fruit and vegetables. Eat a mostly plant-based food. Every meal should be 75% plant-based, and then the remaining 25% can be an animal protein. So that means, for example, that if you're used to eating pasta meals, you'll never get to this point because most of it will be taken up by simple carbohydrates. So look at your plate. How much of it is plant-based, is whole fresh vegetables, and look for small amounts of quality dairy protein, animal protein, sorry. Avoid refined carbohydrates and sugars. So white flour, white breads, pastas, and anything that contains sugars. Definitely when you have PCOS, but really sugar and refined carbohydrates are inflammatory to all of us. So also for endometriosis, a good strategy. And when you have fruit, because fruit has fruit sugars. Now they are healthy sugars, and the molecule is a bit bigger, so it takes a little bit longer for most of those to be broken down, definitely compared to sugar, but it still can increase your blood sugar levels quite dramatically. So combine it with nuts and seeds, because they are little powerhouses of good protein and fat in just one little seed or one little nut. So a handful of nuts and seeds together with an apple, or together with a piece of fruit, or a handful of berries, or can really help you feel and enjoy that sense of sweetness, but it keeps your blood sugar levels lovely and even. You're seeing a trend there, I'm sure. So those are some daily habits to start working towards, whether you have PCOS, whether you have endometriosis, or whether you have both. And as you see, most of these daily habits are the same for PCOS and endometriosis. So if you have both, you don't have to have two different diets. You just it's the same principles. All right. I'd love to hear what your key takeaways have been from this webinar. I'm going to stop sharing. And you can also ask any questions in the chat. So if you have any questions as we've gone through, pop them in the chat, and your key takeaways. I'd love to hear what has been useful for you. So make sure you add that. Let's take a look. Okay, key takeaways. So far confirms what I know. Excellent revision. Excellent. Sometimes these webinars are just useful to confirm to yourself that what you thought you know is actually that you're on the right track, because there's so much confusing information out there. So excellent. Pairing carbs with protein and fat at every meal. Yeah, it's not. We used to do it, but we've gone away from it, and a lot of our meals are now highly carb based. before I studied nutrition, I always thought that pasta was a health food. Well, it isn't. Sorry, Italians. The importance of whole foods, particularly protein, to heal a leaky gut and manage symptoms. Yes, you definitely, together with avoiding your food intolerances, it helps to heal your gut. Again, a key takeaway for me is to include fat and protein in each meal. Cysts on the ovaries are only one symptom of PCOS. Yes, yes. So if you don't have those cysts, it's so easy to not get the diagnosis. I wasn't aware that endometriosis could be in other organs or part of the body. Yeah, it can be anywhere. Did not realize I had forgotten that it can happen in other parts. I guess that's about the endometriosis. How it can be challenging to understand the specific needs unique to an individual. Yes, and that my recommendation is to, if you want to do this, if you want to use nutrition or natural ways of managing, of course, as a nutritionist, I've talked about food, but a naturopath, an acupuncturist, a herbalist, that can also all help to help you reduce your symptoms. So it's not just nutrition. All right. Thank you for that. Just really good to see what you took away from what I've been talking about. So let's have a look at your questions. Oh, nice view. Okay, let me see. How do you confirm which foods you are intolerant to? How do you determine your client was intolerant to bananas as she didn't identify it herself? Yes, that's a very good question. It's very difficult to find out what your food intolerances are from just trying to piece it together from symptoms and what people eat, because food intolerances are different to allergies. So when you have an allergy to a food, first of all, the reaction is very quick, and the reaction is often sort of skin related, or it can have to do with breathing because it has a histamine response. Food intolerances sit in the gut. That means that the food needs to get to the gut first, and that can take anywhere between 24 and 72 hours. So you can eat something now and not have a reaction 3 days from now, but how do you connect it back? Plus, how do you know which part of what you ate caused the intolerance? So I use hair analysis tests. They're very non-invasive. They are not 100% reliable, but it gives a really great start. Often the hair is tested against 1,000 food items. So you get foods like bananas, or because if you can do blood tests to determine food intolerance reactions, although not all, but then you'd need to know what it is you want to be tested for. So we'd have to have some idea, which is really very difficult. What are your thoughts on a juice cleanse, which includes plant-based protein and addition of plant fat such as flaxseed, avocado, or black cumin seed? I don't include cleanses or juice cleanses in my recommendations to clients unless they are interested in it. I have clients who have already gone there and would like to do it in a way that benefits their symptoms. But my main focus is on helping them design a diet that they can follow on a day-to-day basis that reduces their symptoms and that they can stick to for the rest of their life, or until we have a cure for either PCOS or endometriosis. So it's not a key thing that I do. I find that if you eat right for you, then the detoxification happens and you don't need to do a cleanse as such. You have to be very careful that what you put in your juice cleanse doesn't contain any foods you're intolerant to, because then you're just making things worse. What dose of the supplements do you recommend? First, let me talk a little bit about my concern about supplements. Because based on the nutrients that I shared that are helpful for PCOS, for endometriosis, you might be tempted now to go, I've got PCOS, I've got these supplements that, or the nutrients you talked about. I'm going to go to the supermarket or the chemist and buy myself some supplements and I'll be good to go. The over-the-counter available supplements are one produced for the masses, so they are at very low doses and they are not therapeutic supplements. They're kind of focused on keeping you ticking over, if you like. Also, because they have to be produced quite cheaply, the ingredients in the supplements are low quality and they're often additives and fillers, and you can react to those. So you can add more, and these are all chemicals. So you add more chemicals to your body, where we really need to get away from those. So that's why I think it's really important that if you want to get supplemental support, you need to go see a natural health practitioner and get a prescription that is based on your need for nutrients. Because zinc, for example, you could go and get some zinc, because it's clearly needed, but you can easily get an overdose of zinc. And especially with minerals, overdose can have the same symptoms as a deficiency. So how do you know that you're tipping over? So it's not harmless. Most supplements, most nutrients in supplement form can be harmful. And if you are not zinc deficient, for example, taking zinc supplements are really going to make matters worse in a different way. So and they need to be personalized. Just as your diet needs to be personalized, your supplement dosing needs to be personalized. So go see a natural health practitioner to get the right type of supplements and the right dosage. Okay, Emma says, I have interstitial cystitis. Any additional advice in managing this on top of also having endo and PCOS? Well, that tells me if you have cystitis, that means that your immune system is struggling to fight off the bacteria. So that means, and I'm not surprised. Cystitis and endo are best buds, and lots of women with endometriosis have recurring cystitis or chronic cystitis. And it just means that your immune system needs to be supported and so that it can do the work it needs to do. And that requires reducing that inflammation so it doesn't get triggered all the time. It means healing your gut so it doesn't get triggered all the time. So they can actually put its efforts into what it's supposed to do, partly, and that is to reduce, deal with the bacteria in your bladder. Impact of herbicides on inflammation and allergies intolerances. Are organic foods preferable, or is there no difference? Absolutely, organic foods are to be preferred, because all those herbicides and pesticides are triggering the immune system, and they are known hormone disruptors. So anything that's sprayed is going to make things worse. Unfortunately, though, it's not that easy to eat fully organic. I live in a small town south of Sydney, and we only have a Coles, and we don't have and they have a small area with some organic foods, but it's not easy, and then it's ridiculously expensive. So ideally, yeah, practically speaking, not so easy. Is grass-fed free range any better than grain-fed? Anything that nature intended is better. So if we're talking about, we're talking about cows, so meat. Yes, because cows are supposed to eat grass and not grain. So absolutely. So as close as possible to how it's supposed to go in nature is better. Is soy inflammatory and does it impact on hormones? Now, soy is a particular issue with processed foods because processed foods contain lots of soy. And when you have endometriosis, soy can be problematic because soy is a phytoestrogen, so it adds a form of estrogen to your body. Different studies have shown different impacts of soy. There are some that has shown that it can help with endometriosis symptoms, but those studies seem to indicate that if you have stage 4, so the worst version of endometriosis, it can help. But if you don't have endometriosis yet, it increases your risk. The jury is still out on soy, but I always recommend my clients, if they have endometriosis, to avoid soy, simply because we don't want to add more estrogen, a form of estrogen, to your body that will stimulate endometriosis to grow potentially. Can inositol be helpful for someone with endo who also has potential issues with blood glucose levels? Inositol is actually not recommended when you have endometriosis. It's recommended you don't take it. If you have blood glucose level issues, you really want to start managing that through diet. So remove anything that's inflammatory, but also eat a low glycemic diet. So inositol is one of those, and this is what I mean. You need to be really careful with supplements, but when you have endo, it's not a good supplement. Also, do you have any recommendations for someone who has estrogen dominance? So it depends where that came from. There are still specialists and doctors out there who are on the estrogen dominance path of that is why you have endo, or that is the biggest problem with endo. And yes, you have higher levels of estrogen when you're tested for it because your endometriosis produces its own estrogen. So we want to not increase it unnecessarily, but really your main focus is on avoiding. Definitely try to eat organic, so you don't have anything that is a hormone disruptor, but also eat a anti-inflammatory diet to reduce, really to stop the spread and the growth of your endometriosis. When discussing magnesium, are you referring to magnesium glycinate specifically? Yes, it's a well absorbed, but really what you can get that is a good quality magnesium. Would you recommend fermented foods? Oh, absolutely. We should eat more fermented foods. It contains lots of good bacteria, and it's such an easy, natural way of increasing the beneficial bacteria in your gut. So yes, simple answer. Is cauliflower and broccoli bad for improving the risk of PCOS endo? I saw studies suggest this. I think you will also be able to find studies who say it's really excellent. When I work with clients, I'm only worried about cauliflower and broccoli and any of the other brassicas if they also have thyroid issues. So yes, they are excellent vegetables. You shouldn't live on a diet of just cauliflower and broccoli, because then too much is not good either. But unless you have thyroid issues, they're good for you. All the brassicas are good. I'm also wondering the benefit of kefir. So kefir is a fermented milk product, and she says goat kefir. If you have endometriosis, then the problem is it's dairy. And whether it's goat milk used or sheep's milk or camel milk or cow's milk, they're all dairy protein that can get into your bloodstream and cause havoc in your brain. So whilst you have still leaky gut, you want to avoid any type of dairy. That's it. That was the last question. Well, thank you all very much. You really made me think in your questions, and I really enjoy that. And I hope you have some things that you can take away and start working on your PCOS or your endo or both.
Thank you so much, AMG. That was a wonderful presentation. Definitely got some practical tools and strategies to either improve insulin sensitivity or reduce inflammation. So that's great. Definitely about, the importance of personalized nutrition and especially supplementation, getting high quality supplements from practitioners such as yourself. You can go onto the ATMS website and find a practitioner as well in your area and see if there's any health practitioners that can help you with your PCOS or endometriosis. We've also got a few more Natural Medicine Week webinars to go, so you can jump on the naturalmedicineweek.com.au webinar and look up the events and their past recordings and check those out as well. But again, thank you so much, AMG, and everyone for being here.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.